Hello everyone, my name is Melodie and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I'm gonna show you how to make this glamorous, elegant and sexy dress called Monte Carlo. For that you will need the pattern you will find in the description box down below. This is an intermediate sewing pattern, so I will not recommend to make this dress for beginners, just keep that in mind. So to make this dress you'll need the PDF pattern, you will find a link in my Etsy shop. For the main fabric I use some satin, you will need some lining. For the sleeve I use a chiffon fabric, you can use whatever you like. You'll need some interfacing, a hidden zipper, some matching thread and this button loop trim. And you also need some buttons, around 10 to 12. Now print the pattern in A4 or US letter sizes. You don't need to trim anything of the pattern. And you can also print only your size using the layer in Acrobat Reader. Place the pattern one next to each other, following the number you will see on the pattern. And tape everything carefully together. Do not cut anything out before taping the pattern together. When all the pages are taped together, it should look something like this. Don't worry if you don't have the same number as me, this is the placement of my prototype. You will also find the square taste on the first page, make sure to check the measurement before starting. And now you can cut everything out. Before cutting your pieces on the main fabric, I recommend you decast your fabric to prevent it from shrinking. Use a lot of steam and iron carefully. I folded my main fabric in half, so this process is much quicker. And then you can decast all the rest of your fabric, so the lining and the sleeves. So this is how I place my pieces on the main fabric. Don't forget to cut the centerpiece on fold. Since the fabric I use for the sleeve is very thin, I like to use a lot of pins so nothing moves. Don't forget to cut your pieces on the lining and on the interfacing. It is very important to cut every notch and also mark all the marking with this pointy tool. I use it for the dart and for the top of the slit. Interface the cuff and the front and back shoulder straps on the wrong side of the main fabric. So before starting sewing, you should always stitch on a piece of a scrap fabric. You might need to adjust the stitch length or the thread tension. Now let's begin! Sew the front and side bodice right sides together, make sure to connect the notch, repeat on the opposite side and do the same on the lining. Moving on to the back, cut out the inside of the back bodice dart on the paper pattern. Place it on your main fabric and trace out the darts with a pen or chalk. Do the same on the lining. Sew the darts on the back bodice on both the main and the lining. Sew the side seams together. Repeat on the lining. Trim the curves on the front body seam allowances. It will make the seam much more neat. Iron the seam in the following directions. The front seam should be toward the middle center, the side seams should be opened, and the back darts toward the center back. Let's move on to the shoulder straps. Sew the front and the back shoulder strap, wrong sides together, repeat on the lining. Iron the seam opened. Now place the main fabric and the lining, right sides together, and sew the outer strap seam, which means the curvier side. Trim the curve. Turn the strap right side out and press. Attach the straps to the bodice. Make sure to match the notches. Next, the skirt. Mark the inner seam line of the dart with a pen or a chalk. Sew the darts on each side. Serge the edges of the skirt on the side of every pieces. If you don't have an overlock machine, you can use the zigzag stitch on a regular machine. Sew all the skirt's pieces together, matching the notches, but make sure to leave the slit on the left side opened. Iron all the seams following the same logic as for the bodice. Fold the slit seam 1 cm on each side. Secure with pins and stitch at 0.5 cm on the right side. Okay, so now it's time to attach the bodice to the skirt. This is a kind of tricky part, but if you followed all the seam allowances correctly, you should be fine. Just make sure to pin every seam allowances in front of each other, that all the seam lines matches. I spent a little more time on this step, but this is so much worth it. Everything is nicely pinned and aligned. You can stitch at 1 cm from the edge. Now let's move on to the sleeves. Cut the slit on the sleeves following the pattern. Cut a small piece of interfacing, approximately 2 cm. Iron this piece of interfacing on the top of the slit. Cut through the small piece of interfacing to open the top of the slit again. This will help to secure the top of the slit. Fold the slit edge 0.5 cm 2 times to make a mini hem. Iron and secure with pins. Stitch the hem at 0.3 cm on the wrong side.
realize there's nowhere to go. 'Cause the thing we're searching for is just waiting back home. And you've done your walking.
Now let's make the gatherings. To gather the sleeves, adjust the stitch length setting to be longer. I set my stitch length to 4. Always remember to set your stitch length back to normal once you're done. This technique is called basting. Stitch 2 parallel lines at the bottom of the sleeves in the seam allowances, and then stitch 2 other parallel lines on the sleeve's head in the seam allowances as well. Be careful to gather only between the notches. To create the gathers, you have to pull 2 threads together in opposite directions. Measure the armhole length from the back and the front bodice. Mark down those measurements on your sleeve's paper pattern. Gather the back of the sleeve head until the center sleeve head notch. The gathered back sleeve length should match the back armhole length. Verify by measuring. Do the same on the front sleeve's head. Once you check the length, tie the gathered threads together to secure everything. Gather the bottom sleeves. The finished gathered measurements are written on the paper pattern. Close the sleeve by sewing the sides together, serge or zigzag stitch the edges. Now let's move on to the cuff. This technique was inspired by DARIAPATTERMAKING. I saw this technique on the million buttons dress, and it's my favorite way to make button-up cuffs. Press the cuff in half. Fold 1 cm from one edge of each cuff and press. Trim 1 mm of each side of the cuff with the pre-folded edge. Then trace 1 cm from the edge of the cuff. Place the button loop trim on this line. The loops should be facing inward. And stitch. Be careful, the first button loop should start 1 cm from the top.
Nothing can tear us apart, like nothing can tear us apart. I knew the minute I saw you standing there in line, it had to be fake. So in your phone you didn't know.
Trim and heat seal with a lighter. Repeat on the other cuff, but be careful to be symmetrical. Fold the cuffs in half, right sides together, and sew the 2 edges. Trim the corners. Turn the cuff right side out, make sure the corners are sharp, and iron the cuff gently. Sew the cuff to the sleeve. I'm gonna show you how to do it. Pin the right side of the cuff with the unfolded edge to the wrong side of the sleeve's hem. Pin the first corner and the last corner of the cuff to the sleeve. Then fold the sleeve hem in half and mark the middle. Then pin this mark to the cuff center, stitch the cuff to the sleeve.
Nothing can tear us apart.
Turn the cuff right side out, pull the seam allowance downward and cover the stitch line with a folded edge. Top stitch 1 mm from the edge. Repeat for the second sleeve. Then you can remove the large gathering stitch if needed. Press the cuff gently again. Now sew the sleeves to the armholes like usual. Be careful to match the front and the back armhole notches and the center sleeve notch. Remove the large gathering stitch if needed. Finish the seam allowance with an overlock or zigzag stitch, but only on the sleeve head. Start serging a little before the back sleeve notch and finish after the front sleeve notch. Let's attach the lining to the bodice. Serge the bottom edge of the lining. Pin the lining on the dress, right sides together, and make sure to follow all the notches. For the underarm part, trim the seam allowance, that way you'll be able to pin the lining correctly. I'm showing you how I do it. Stitch the lining to the dress. Trim the curves and the edges. Pull the lining out of the dress, push the seam allowance toward the outside, and stitch the lining on it. The stitch line will hold the lining into place. The stitch line will only be visible from the inside, not the outside. In French, it's called a dead seam. Place the lining on the inside of the dress and iron the collar edge.
Just like the water falling from the sky.
Now let's move on to the most difficult part, in my opinion, the invisible zipper. But I found a technique to make it much easier. This technique was inspired by DARIAPATTERMAKING Rose Cafe Bustier dress. And now it's my favorite way to sew an invisible zipper on a garment with a lining. Before you begin, measure the zip assembly length on the paper pattern and make sure your zipper is at least 1.5 cm longer. If your zipper needs to be trimmed, you need to create a new zipper stop. For that, simply stop stitch on the zipper teeth and then trim and heat seal the end with a lighter. Now let's begin. Pull out the lining from the dress, open the zipper tape and pin it to the first center back seam, right sides together. Fold the top of the zipper tape and pin the zipper to the back seam. Stitch the zipper at 0.5 cm from the edge with a regular foot on the zipper tape. Stop stitching where the center back seam starts. Mark where the seams stop at the opposite side of the zipper tape, so both sides stop at the exact same height. Also mark the waistline on the tape, then pin the other side on the dress, right sides together. Make sure the marks are matching. Stitch with the same regular foot at 0.5 cm from the bottom to the top. Now change the foot of your sewing machine into a special invisible zipper foot. Open the zipper entirely and put the slider below where the center back seam starts. This is why it's important that your zipper should be at least 1.5 cm longer than your zipper opening. This is a universal rule for invisible zipping. Start at the top of the left side, stitch the zipper tape close to the teeth, but make sure to not stitch in the teeth, otherwise your zipper will be unusable. Stop stitching at the mark you made earlier, where the back seam starts. Repeat on the right side also, from the top to the bottom. Now we can attach the lining to the zipper. With the zipper opened, turn the zipper seam line inside out and pin the right side of the lining on the wrong side of the tape. Change your pressing foot back to your regular one and stitch as close to the teeth as possible until where the lining waistline ends. Trim the corners and place the lining inside the dress, then press gently the center back. Moving on to the finishes, serge the bottom edge of the dress and then fold 1 cm and hem on the right side by stitching at 0.8 cm. I like to make stop stitches in the seam allowances of the bodice to prevent the lining from pulling out. Now let's prepare the cuffs for the buttons. Measure 2 cm from the cuff edge and mark with a pen or chalk. Overlap the cuff edges, mark the button placement on the cuff through the button loop, and sew the buttons by hand. And voila! Your Monte Carlo dress is now ready! You can hack this pattern by making a sleeveless version, I'm sure it's gonna be beautiful, or you can make it into a crop top or even a skirt. Don't forget to tag me on Instagram so I can see and share your makes. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in my next tutorial.